There are two levels of how SNCC made its way to voter registration. It's interesting because they almost are contradictory. At one level, it's the Kennedy administration. The Kennedy administration hated the sit-ins. The Kennedy administration hated the freedom rides. The Kennedy administration hated SNCC. Robert Kennedy called us sons of bitches. And they were trying to figure out how to stop us. Remember, this is the Cold War. So from the Kennedy administration's point of view, in a world in which you were beginning to get new nations emerge from Africa and Asia, to have sit-ins and freedom rides embarrassed the United States. It made it more difficult to compete with the Soviet Union for influence with these nations. How can you say the United States represents freedom and democracy if young people are being hauled off to jail because they're seeking a donut or a Coca-Cola or a cup of coffee at a lunch counter or trying to get a dinner in a restaurant? So the Kennedys were embarrassed and hostile to us, and in a broader sense, just hostile to this whole idea of direct action, whether it was CORE or SNCC. So what they thought was if we could steer the students into voter registration, you could mitigate this embarrassment. And they would no longer be sitting in. And because they were the Kennedys, they had access and control of foundations that they were able to line up and say, these people will give you money if you do voter registration. SNCC had this huge argument. It went on for months. Is it selling out? And it was, the organization almost became destroyed by this. And then Ella Baker steps in fact, and resolves it. She says, well, why don't you set up two wings of your organization? One can be a voter registration wing, and another can be a direct action wing that will continue the sit-ins. And of course we all say, oh, why didn't we think of that? and that's what happened. So that's one way. And now at the same time, local people, the Amzie Moores, the E.W. Steptoes, the C.C. Brown, these names won't mean much to people who are listening to this interview, but trust me, these were incredibly strong people. From their vantage point, they said, we have the numbers. If we could get people registered to vote, our people, black people, say up in the Mississippi Delta where I work, 13 counties in the state of Mississippi, forming the 2nd Congressional District of Mississippi, 66% black. Less than 1% of those people were registered to vote. Why? Terrorism, violence, reprisal, etc. So you have these guys up there saying, we need a voter registration campaign. And they were frustrated because the NAACP, and most of them were local leaders of the NAACP, felt that places like Mississippi, Central Alabama, Southwest Georgia were just too dangerous. And that if you tried to work in those places, all that would happen was, A, you'd get a lot more killing, and B, money would be sucked up that didn't result in anything. The NAACP felt that you had to tackle easier places and sort of gradually surround tough places like Mississippi and Alabama and other parts of the South. So these guys, these are the Medgar Evers and the Amzie Moores, they're frustrated. They want to get something going. So what happens is Bob Moses is traveling through the South to recruit students to attend SNCC's second conference. This is in the summer of 1960. And he's got a list of contacts that Ella Baker has given him. And one of the people that Miss Baker sends Bob to is Amzie Moore, the head of the Bolivar County, Mississippi NAACP. And Amzie sits Bob down and basically says, yes, I've been watching the sit-ins, and I admire the sit-ins, and I admire what you all are doing, but I have no interest in doing that here. He says, I want a voter registration campaign. And Bob says he had never, ever thought about voter registration before AMSI literally sat him down on the couch. And it turns out AMSI has this whole plan in his head that he's mapped out for how, if he had the people, he would organize a voter registration campaign. He's taking Bob around saying, we could do this here, we could do this there. And Bob said, I remember he told me once, he says, I went to school, Bob went to school in the 1950s. He said, all during my school year, they had taught me about the Iron Curtain in Europe and the denial of voting rights, and it never ever occurred to me that in America there was a Cotton Curtain, and behind the Cotton Curtain, voting rights were denied. So AMSI goes to SNCC's second conference and makes a pitch for voter registration. In the following spring, Bob comes back to Mississippi to begin SNCC's first voter registration campaign.